we're going to see a lot of starvation. And of course, this leads to pandemic. We'll have real pandemics because, again, when you have many people starving, first of all, they start migrating and eating things they don't normally eat, and their immune systems are depressed. Anyway, bottom line is, every time you get big famines, you get big pandemics.
Well, good. Then we can lock everybody. Then we can lock everybody down again, eh? That'd be real fun. We can lock everybody down again, like they did in Shanghai, and then we can disrupt the supply chains even more, and then we can starve a bunch more people, and maybe we will settle out with 600 million people and have a sustainable planet. You know, with all those 600 million people living in the ashes and the skeletons. Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure and privilege today to be speaking with correspondent Michael Yon. I reached out to Michael because I've been extremely interested in the European civil protests, specifically those centering at the moment in the Netherlands, inspired in no small part by the Canadian truckers' convoy. Those protests are receiving short shrift and minimal coverage in what has become known as the legacy media, which is more and more in a collusional relationship, let's say, with the globalist utopians who are attempting to guide our destiny so destructively and unsuccessfully. I reached out to Michael because I want to find out, to the degree that I can, what's going on, particularly in the Netherlands and more broadly in Europe and around the world. And he's a cardinal person to talk to in this regard. And he's a very interesting person in his own right for all sorts of reasons, which we'll get into as we progress. Michael was one of America's youngest Green Berets. That's not an easy thing to manage at 19 years old. He spent more than half his life overseas in more than 80 countries. So he's been everywhere, man, and has seen many things. Mr. Yon is also the author of 3 books published in the United States, including Moment of Truth in Iraq, 2016, and 3 others in Japan, covering, among other topics, the present and developing information war with China. He is America's most experienced combat correspondent, not necessarily a title for the faint of heart, let's say. Most recently, as I said, and this is the proximal reason for this discussion, Michael has been tracking and covering the rising tide of civil disobedience in the Netherlands and elsewhere in Europe. So thank you, Michael, very much for coming in to talk to me today. I understand that you're in the Netherlands right now. You've been there for a couple of weeks. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're in the Netherlands and what you've been seeing and what you think it means.
Yes, sir, Jordan, and thank you for inviting me on. I've watched your show for years now. It's incredible to come on. Yeah, and you mentioned the Canadian truckers. That their courage cannot be, and their inspiration cannot be understated. Courage is courageous, as is cowardice. And so we must display courage. Recently, some months ago, earlier this year, I drove from California to Washington, D.C. with American truckers who were inspired by Canadian truckers. And they were flying Canadian flags. These are American truckers and Americans over bridges. I must have seen hundreds of thousands flying almost as many Canadian flags as Americans. You may have seen it on the news while the news sort of blockaded it.
No, we never see anything like that on the news in Canada. That's because, our media is so subsidized by the government that anything that runs against government dictates, and I hate to say that about a country like Canada, is just minimally covered or not covered at all. I had no idea that the American truckers were flying Canadian flags. You'd think that'd be news in Canada, because isn't it news when Canada becomes interesting? And in fact, I know almost nothing about the truckers' convoy in the U.S. to Washington.